Hello. Yeah. Many of you told me that they want to know what the two new Infoceuticals are about. But before we start, I would like to say that I feel that at the moment we seem to have arrived in the 21st century, finally, because I think the 21st century is about putting together all that specific knowledge that we gained in the 20th century and then put the puzzles together. And I'm happy with other people like for example, Dr. Jack Kruse, or with researchers like Dr. Pollack and many others to be part of that and go into that field of putting the puzzle together. There's so much knowledge coming up in the morning. In the moment, we are learning at the moment so much, and then we try to apply this knowledge in the development of applicable new Infoceuticals for NES, and that's what the two Infoceuticals are about. Let me start to tell you what I would like to cover with you, because this is a little bit around the thoughts that I had in the last few months, and about what I've read in the last few months and was thinking about, which led at the end to development of the two new Infoceuticals. Harry told me last September, I think, that please read the book of Jared Pollack and please read other things and try to meet Jack Kruse, and then try to develop some new cell driver. And I said, okay, let's see what I can do. And it was quite early, it was clear for me that the cell driver ED3 should be as it is. I will tell you later why. And of course, all these ideas were very interesting. And with time, it became clear that we should have two Infoceuticals that provide how the cells and how the body uses energy at day and night time at different times of the day. So let's go first a little bit to the fundamentals of life, which are related to how energy arranges itself in cycles and by coherence. We will talk shortly about Dr. Kruse's three-legged stool, and we will go a little bit into different environments for life, which we found 2 billion years ago on Earth, and maybe we still find these environments today in our cells, in our eukaryotic cells, and in the work of our mitochondria. And we will see how we burn our food. And all this is related to circadian biology. And in this, there is an omega-3 fatty acid which plays an important role, which is called DHA. We will talk about this too. And then I will tell you how the day and night Infoceuticals are made and how we should use them, or we could use them. And at the end, there's a little bit about blue light, because we have a new reading on the environmental screen on Provision 4 about blue light. Sarah already mentioned the book of May Van Ho, The Rainbow and the Worm. And I like this one fundamental property of life that she mentioned in her book, that says it, like life, body or body field, is to be able to summon energy at will, to engage in extremely rapid and efficient energy transformation. And this is so important to understand life, that we look a little bit at these things. So how do we store energy and information to make life possible? So there's a concept of cycles, which we find everywhere in the body. There are biochemical pathways, like citrate cycle or others. And all these cycles, they are connected to each other. They create shorter, longer cycles, bigger cycles. We are embedded in the cycles of the Earth, in the cycles of the Sun, and even bigger cosmic cycles. And when we look at cycles, they seem to create the space and the time of local systems, like we are as human beings, organisms. And they also create, when we look at cycles, how they would look like, starting with a flowing energy and then turning around in a cycle, creating a space which might look like a cavity. And then we find lots of those cycles connected to each other to create a cavity system where energy and information exchange is possible, and it should be possible in a very, very fast way, not only by the velocity which might be provided by the circulation system and the nervous system, but also by non-local quantum phenomena, like quantum tunneling processes, for example. For this, we need coherent structures. And coherent structures are always very, very ordered. There may be coupled cycles, they may be crystal-like, very ordered, and there may be ordered magnetic fields, creating the body field. Or when we look at the living matrix, we look at the collagen fibers in the living matrix, which are connected to the ordered water we heard about today. We must have charge. We find the membrane potential, and many, many lipids are involved in that charge, as we will see later. We have the water battery we were talking about today. We have an energy flow, mostly provided by electrons, a little bit by protons too. And of course, we have many, many signaling molecules and signaling photons in our body that provide energy and information exchange. Just a few words about the two most important particles that we know, which are the protons and the electrons. They are so important because they have a really, really long lifetime. The proton is positively charged. We find it in the atom nuclei. We would find them as free hydrogen nuclei. They give the mass of the body. They create, or they are part of gravity fields. They have a low magnetic moment, 660 times smaller than that of the electron. And we could say they have more potential energy because they don't move as much as the electrons do. Instead, the electron has the negative charge. We find it in the atomic shell. We have lots of free electrons because they can be solved easily out of the shells. The mass is very low. It's only 1 per 1,860 times that of a proton. It has a strong magnetic spin. Electrons seem to be able to be converted into photons and vice versa. We have to look at the photoelectric effect, which was discovered by Albert Einstein. Electrons give us the flexibility. Dr. Pollack said to us, be negatively charged and be healthy. That means that we have lots of electrons in our body. And of course, they stand for kinetic energy and energy flow. We also need magnetic fields. And magnetic fields create electron flow, and moving electrons create stronger electromagnetic fields. I couldn't stand not to put in that image that you see here. Does anyone have an idea what this might be? This rainbow kind image? It was on the internet a few weeks ago, and it shows us the photograph, the image of light itself. Light being a wave and a particle at one time. and it looks like a rainbow. And this is quite interesting. And I put there Maven Ho, the rainbow and the worm. And I don't know who of you have read her book. And when you read the book, you understand why it is called the rainbow and the worm. Because they have developed with colleagues polarizing microscope, and they have looked at living beings like worms, for example, and they looked the same. They all showed the colors of the whole rainbow. So this proved us that we are all light beings. Every organism is a light being, looking like a photon itself. When we go back to our protons and electrons, they have different properties. So when we have loads of protons, we have a low pH, and this gives us acidity that we mostly don't want. We have more mass, and there may be swelling when there are many, many protons. In the mitochondria, for example, but also after an injury. Protons give us rigidity. We find loads of them in inflammation when there's a lack of electrons. They lead to aging together with rigidity, and we find loads of them in disease states. In the opposite, the electrons, when we have many of them, we have a higher pH, which is an alkaline state. We have less mass. We're more flexible. We have more electric current. We do anti-aging, and we feel healthy and well. And of course, we have negative charge. Dr. Jack Kruse talks about the three-legged stool, and one of the legs is the light, which comes from the sun and is an important energy source, maybe the most important. The next leg is magnetism. We live in the Earth's magnetic field, and the magnetism gives us coherence and orchestration. And the third stool is water chemistry, and we know how water is used as a battery. And when astronomers at NASA and others look at other planets to find life, they look for a magnetic field around the planet, they look for light, and they look for water. And this makes life possible. So life is energy flow, mostly flow of electrons. And those electrons, they carry photons. The faster an electron is moving, the higher it is energized, the higher the frequency of the photon that it's carrying. Electrons could be said to be our energetic currency. We get them from being grounded, from the sunlight, but also the water is providing us with electrons. We have learned it from the talk in the morning. And of course, our food provides us with electrons. So this is very important. I think nobody of us had thought of us before, really. We all learn how the food is broken down in biochemistry and how at the end we make ATP of it. But we don't think of the electrons. In our body we find the eukaryotic cells, which are cells who have a nucleus and other organelles. In our talk today, the mitochondria will be important. And the first eukaryotic cells, they arise around 2.1 billion years ago, at the end of the first total glaciation period on Earth, when for the first time oxygen appeared in the atmosphere. Before there was a lot of methane, and this decreased. And in the depths of the oceans, there were methanogenic archaea living. They look like bacteria, but they are not real bacteria. And they still live today in extreme environments without oxygen and without light. And they are also living. But what do we find in the deep sea? When we look at the deep sea and we look for black smokers, for example, what is there? We have water, and we have the volcanoes, because the black smokers, they are related to volcanoes. So we have infrared radiation in the water that comes from the Earth. And this is something that enables the water battery to be charged. And this makes life possible even without light and even without oxygen in the real depths of the oceans. And the other part of bacteria that lived after that time were this Protean purpurbacteria, which used sunlight as energy source, and they created the first photosynthesis. And when those archaea and the Protean purpurbacteria fused to become the eukaryotic cell, they seem to have become the mitochondria that we have today. But why did this fusion happen? When we think about life and what it is for, then I always think that life is to explore everything and to gain experience and to feel things, to make the whole universe more conscious. And I think the universe or everything has created biological life to explore everything that is possible. And the eukaryotic cell, in my eyes, is or was supposed to be more independent and to use more energy to be able to explore much more and in a better way. So I borrowed this slide from Harry and his energy presentation because it fits very well into what I would like to say here. In our cells today, we have two different genomes still. One is in the nucleus and the other one is in the mitochondria. And when we look at the genome that we find in the nucleus, they're just mostly coming from the archaea. And this genome is for repair and growth of our DNA, for example, but also for proteins. And in a healthy cell and metabolism. And we all know that in chronic disease cancer, we find mitochondria that don't work anymore. And then the archaea part of our cells, they have to use glycolysis to produce energy without using oxygen. So we still can go back and live with a metabolism like cells did 2.1 billion years ago. We have many mitochondria in different tissues, and in the heart muscle, for example, 35% of the heart muscle mass is mitochondria. It is similar in the nervous system tissue in the brain. And we find DNA in the mitochondria always in several copies. And there's no problem with mutation in the DNA genome when it's not more than 20%. When there is up to 40% mutation, this could already lead to obesity, to alcohol intolerance, and reduced physical resilience. But when it's more than 60% mutation, we develop severe disease, chronic fatigue CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, for example. Mitochondria have membranes, and only oxygen and carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen monoxide get through directly without carrier. And of course, we need highly unsaturated fatty acids in the membrane to make electron flow possible. When we burn our food, I wrote down how this works briefly, but I don't want to mention it now. So at the end, we create NADH and FADH, both from breaking down glucose and from breaking down fats in beta oxidation. Those two substances, they go directly into what we call the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. At the end of the electron transport chain, ATP, the so-called energy molecule, is made. But I wrote NAD .H and FAD .H. What are the dots? What do you think? These are two electrons. So NAD is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is similar to vitamin B3, and it's a coenzyme, and it transports electrons and hydrogen. So it transports electrons and protons. And we need both of them to create ATP, or heat infrared energy. So they go both into the electron transport chain. You can look on the internet how the electron transport chain works. I think it would be too much to go into that. And with oxygen, the two electrons and the hydrogen, they create later ATP and water. So this is a very, very important process that happens in our mitochondria. We have protons, and we have electrons, and we have oxygen, and we make water of it. But why are the electrons so important? Nature has done two things here. The first is that this provides us with a lot of energy that we can use, and it provides us with a lot of information. Because the electrons, where are they coming from? Electrons that we have here, they come from our food. And are those electrons all the same? They are different. It depends on what we eat. It depends on, for example, when we eat fruits, in which part of the year, in which season they grow. And then they carry different photons. And we can see the different qualities of the food or the fruit that we eat in their different colors. So that's why we should eat always a very, very colored mixture of things to have the full spectrum of information that we can get from those electrons that carry the photon energy in them. And this photon energy is used by our body. So we harvest this photon energy from the electrons of our food and put it at the end. I don't want to explain you how that works, but we put it at the end on our ATP molecule, which is not only energy providing, but also an important signaling molecule. And this is what we should understand. This is a quantum process. And this is how people could find out centuries and thousands of years ago that when the color of this fruit or of this grains that we eat is such, and sometimes also the form, then it is good for these or these diseases to be used as a kind of a drug. But the reason is, and we start to learn it today, that there is a photon information that is carried on our food. The opposite of this is happening in our green plants when there is made photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, water is split by the energy of these photons of the sun, and it is then stored in the carbohydrates and fats. And we eat those, and we harvest it to make water again. So it's a fuel cell in our body, provides us with a lot of energy. And the last enzyme in the electron transport chain, the fifth enzyme, the ATPase enzyme, this is rotating. And this is like an electromagnetic field generator. And the better this generator works all over in every cell, the stronger is our electromagnetic field. And the strong electromagnetic field can move electrons better and can orchestrate how our body works. And the light quanta information that we harvest from the electrons is then stored in the adenosine part of the ATP molecule. And this is what the adenosine part is made for. So now we understand why we have ATP. It's a very complicated molecule, and we learn that the energy is in the phosphorus. But why should we have 3 phosphors with such a complicated adenosine molecule around? It has 3 moving electrons, and these electrons get accelerated by putting photon energy on it. And this happens in the electron transport chain. At the end, we could say our body works light quanta controlled. When we go to the next, this is also something what happens at daytime and nighttime. So we see this in our flowers, that in the morning they unfold, and in the evening they shrink again. And there are different controlling mechanisms. This can be induced by light, by temperature, or by water, by different air humidity. It may also be in the genetics in some plants. But there are environmental factors that have a big influence on it. And when we unfold, like this bear is stretching, yeah, the trigger for unfolding and waking up in the morning is coming from a hormone that is called cortisol. And this unfolds the proteins, and we wake up, and then we stretch normally when we take the time to do it. Then we stretch to make our proteins with related water layers to make them a little bit more coherent again. And then we have the daytime with lots of electromagnetic energy from the sun. Then we have the photons that are carried by the ATP molecule. Through the day, we lose electrons by physical activity. We unfold more proteins, and we create bigger amounts of free radicals because of the activity of our mitochondria. And then at night, we have to shrink again. And this may happen in cold. There's something that is called CT, cold thermogenesis. So cold can induce the production of heat in our body, which then leads to further charge separation of water. And by this, we restore an amount of electrons. And these electrons are then put into the proteins that were unfolded too much at daytime, and we repair them. And this happens at nighttime. And all the muscles are relaxed, and there is not too much noise from all that work of the proteins. And in the REM phase, when we have relaxed muscles and only our eye muscles move, REM is rapid eye movement, then there is something happening in sleep that is called uncoupling of ATP production. So then the last step in the electron transport chain, which leads to the production of ATP, does not happen. Instead, the energy that is already there is converted into heat. And this is used to charge our batteries again. And so we have daily cycles, of course, and we have also seasonal cycles, as we see in animal hibernation. And these cycles belong to the circadian rhythms. And the cause, of course, is the Earth's rotation, associated with the change of sunlight. And of course, we have not only brightness and darkness, but also different magnetism. Because at daytime, we have electromagnetic activity, which is really strong. And at nighttime, we go more into the magnetotail of the Earth. It's getting dark. Free radicals. Again, we lose electrons. But light also creates electric current, which is important for living. And it creates stronger magnetic fields in the body, what we also need at night. But in the darkness at night, there is normally no photon activity, no electromagnetic activity. But today we have lots of non-native electromagnetic activity also at night. It's the Wi-Fi and many other things. So it would be good when we could have a grounded sleep in a much, much more static magnetic field in the magnetotail of the Earth in the dark. And in this time, the electrons that are produced can be used to repair our proteins that we have used at daytime. This leads to shrinking again. The action of cold can facilitate this. This is also then related to what we hear in diets sometimes, that lose weight while sleeping. You know what happens? Did you hear about it? Lose weight while sleeping? We burn our fat at night to create that heat. But we must be able to do it, and this is important. And at the end, when we sleep in cold, or when it's cold at night, cold strengthens the magnetic field as well as electron flow. So it may be that we have different metabolic pathways. Could be two, or maybe we discover more. There is one that is light controlled, and it works on a daily cycle, and the light goes into the eye, and then it meets DHA, which is the omega-3 fatty acid. Then it goes through the suprachiasmatic nucleus and the hypothalamus to the pineal gland, and it blocks the production of melatonin, so we wouldn't sleep at daytime. There's another light-controlled cycle, which is a seasonal cycle, where our gut senses the season through the photons carried by our food. And now we can understand why people say eat seasonal food to be healthy. Because when we eat summer photons in wintertime, it doesn't fit our metabolism. Maybe we will see later why. And there seems to be a temperature-controlled pathway, which is a more seasonal cycle. Because when it's cold in wintertime, we would not die in the dark, but we would die when it's too cold, so we must be able to produce heat. And that's why we eat highly energized photon food in summer, which is carbohydrates, because they grow in summer, and for this they have many, many highly energized photons in it. And these photons have the color that is blue, and they are highly energized. And when they come into our body, they are very often used to create fat. And we need this fat for the winter time, when there is not so much light, and we can use the cold, because we are embedded normally in all the natural cycles. Remember the start of our talk, we are embedded in the cycles, and nature made it very intelligent how all these cycles are coupled to make use of each other. So in the cold, we would then burn the fat and have our warm energy from the fat. And of course, for this, we need loads of vitamin D and some vitamin A. That's why the vitamin D has many, many effects, and is very, very important in so many things. This is only one of it. So the next thing I was looking at was DHA. It's always hard for me to speak the word DHA, which is docosahexaionic acid or something like that. It's always hard for me to say, especially in English. There is a very good book about the DHA. It's called The DHA Story by Robert Abel, Jr., MD. And this is a molecule that converts light into electric current and vice versa in the cell membranes. And in our retina, we find 60% DHA in the cell membranes, where all the light comes in, and especially in the brain, we still find 30%. This is really, really important. And they did studies about stress and immune response with lower and higher DHA intakes. And the lower the DHA intake, the higher the stress level and the lower the immune responses. And the higher the DHA intake, the better is our immune response and the less stress we would have, because our nervous system would work better. Another researcher is Michael Crawford from the UK, and you can find interesting articles from him on the internet. So the DHA omega-3 fatty acid is so important that nature didn't change this molecule since 600 million years. It's still the same, but why is this? DHA polarizes in a magnetic field, and it becomes a semiconductor that will only allow electrons to pass at a specific energy level to contribute or control the depolarization. And this is what we need in our brain. And this is a lipid that provided the intra and intercell structure to create compartments and specialization. This is the reason, it seems, that we have such a big brain when we have one. And also, the dolphins and the whales have a big brain compared to their body mass. And this is something that distinguishes us from a chimpanzee, for example, because in evolution, humans have eaten much more DHA than our relatives that live on land. And it's very interesting when you read Robert Abel's book here, there's a chapter that is called Why Cats Eat Mice. We cannot really produce big amounts of DHA ourselves in our liver from other fatty acids, only a small amount. So we should have DHA in our diet. And that's why we should use fish oil or krill oil, because it is in algae from cold seawater. And then all the krill eats the algae, and the krill is eaten by the whales and other fishes, and at the end we could eat fish, for example. And it is not provided in plants on the land. But the mice can produce DHA, but the cat cannot. So the cat needs DHA and has to eat mice. And the mouse would never eat a cat because it doesn't need the cat's DHA. Yeah, it really seems that DHA is one of the reasons that mankind became intelligent. So it is the most important energy converter in our cell membranes, and it has the ability to slow down photons. Remember we said when we eat carbohydrates, the photons have blue color, highly energized. DHA can slow them down because in our mitochondria there are also differences. We have enzyme complexes in the electron transport chain where in different organs blue photons, when they are carried on electrons, they wouldn't fit into the mitochondria. And we get in trouble with energy production in the cells. And look at the structure of DHA on the left image here. This is very, very, very regular. It creates a magnet-like structure and is very, very regular. So it is able to provide tunneling processes. And the DPA, which is also an omega-3, but it doesn't have 6 double bonds, only 5 in a different distance, and then the tunneling blocks. And it wouldn't work anymore. So we need this DHA. And then I was looking with space resonance matches like Peter Fraser did. I was looking how DHA information represents matches to body field structures. So the DHA matches directly to electrons. That, yeah, it's obvious. And also in presence of BFA. So it matches directly to the infoceutical that is called fat metabolism. It matches to some drivers like cell driver, for example, but also to skin and liver driver and many others. It matches to ES13, for example, which is important for our metabolism. And it also matches to some brain holograms, but some only in the presence of BFA, because it may be that we need a certain magnetic field to have this match. There are so many interconnections from parts of the body field to DHA, which are outlined here, and you can read them when you have the presentation. So now, then let's look at the Infoceuticals. Harry showed us that we would see them on the new screen, so you cannot see it. It's not it's not visible, the reading, because the screen is too small here. We find them on the new big field screen. And the day Infoceutical contains information in this order that is given here, representing water, protons, oxygen, sunlight. This is something what we need first. We have water and we need sunlight to charge it. And what I could find is, I have a device at home where I can measure through the skin the partial oxygen pressure in the tissues. And I was testing some of the modern oxygenized waters and other oxygenizing processes that are available, methods that are available. And it turned out that I got the best results in the oxygen supply as partial pressure in the tissue by having enough water. Oxygenized or not, doesn't matter. So water seems to be so important, providing oxygen to the tissue. So then the sunlight comes into the body and is converted into electric current by DHA. And then we make electrons flow. And there is the BFA content too that aligns this electron flow with our body field, with the magnetic field of the body. And at the end, added potassium iodine as a tissue salt number 15 because we have cerebrospinal fluid in different cavities in the body, in our brain. And iodine seems to stabilize the charge that we can create in the water in these cavities. And this may be also related to the function of the thyroid gland then, and how all the energy controlling mechanisms work. So it's still all at the beginning, and we have to look at so many things to understand how the body really works, but it's so exciting. So this is the information, what it is made of. And then I looked at matches, and it matches to all the 12 EI, to all the 12 integrators that we have, and to all terrains. It matches to the sympathetic nervous system, which is active at daytime. It matches to a cell driver in presence of iron, with iron transporting oxygen, but also creating a magnetic field. And then, and this was interesting, it was matching to positive emotions, like charisma, concentration, confidence, courage, bravery, enthusiasm, honesty, love, sympathy, and tolerance. That was quite interesting. And when I tested it first, I really was a little bit more optimistic when I had it. And all the people I gave it, they wanted it again. So my wife always said, give me some happiness drops. There were some matches in the cells with our centrioles. In the centrioles, they are very important, how information is converted in the cell and through the cell, creating all the tubular structures. Then we have a match to the optic zone, so it may help the body field get rid of the effects of radioactivity in the optic zones. It affects hyperemia in inflammation, and It matches to lower and higher blood pressure and also to vertigo. So when we have high readings in a scan, what should we think of and what could we tell our clients? So maybe they're missing sunlight. And I think this was the case when I tested it on all the people at the beginning of March. It was still bad weather in Europe, and it was still gray, and there was not enough sunlight. We may think about DHA in the diet. We also have to think about dehydration, which is very important. We could ask for depressive moods. We could look at inflammation and pain. And of course, we should maybe have a look at the centrioles and how the cells are structured. And centrioles are also needed for movement of the small cilios and like legs of the cells, how they can walk and how spermia can swim. This is also related to the centrioles in the cells. So this is what we could think of when we use it. Sorry. The night infoceutical has other representations of information in that order. So we have the hydrophilic layer of the cell membrane. Then, of course, we have hydrogen and water. Then we have the protoplasma, connective tissue. We have put infrared information in it with 3 micrometers or 3,000 nanometers, which are found in Jared Pollack's book. We don't know if the mitochondria are creating 3 micrometer infrared heat, or I don't know. But you know, I have this hobby of global scaling, and when we look here, there is the spectrum of the wavelengths, and this would be an important node, and this is here where we find the 3 micrometer, and this is a so-called, if somebody would be familiar with it, this is a so-called green area where there is a range of possibilities of resonance. So maybe it's not only the 3,000, but maybe less or a little bit more, which all fits into that gray part of the spectrum, because nature gives us always flexibility to work with. But the matching worked very well with the 3 micrometers. Then, of course, we have the electrons again. And I found a number set for liquid cell tissue circulation. So we heard about the liquid mechanics that are created in tubules. Maybe not only in the capillaries, but maybe also in the microtubules in the cells. There's so much movement when the cell is full with EZ structures. And then, of course, we need magnet information. And at the end, I added our kidney integrator, EI6. Why? This is an infoceutical for the night. And integrator 6 matches to melatonin, to the pineal gland. It matches to DHEA, it matches to the thymus gland, which is very important for the immune system. And then I still was not really satisfied with it because I thought something's missing. And somehow it turned out that I have to add the information of vitamin E. And this is what you see behind the protoplasma here, which is a tocotrienols. This is the group of all the 8 natural vitamin E that we find. And vitamin E is very important to be imparted in the cell membranes to make an electron flow possible in the cell membrane. The night infoceutical matches with different things, with magnetic fields, magnetic constant field like the Earth's magnetic field at night, with electrostatic fields, water flow, with a parasympathetic nervous system, then some important viruses, the herpes group and Coxsackie, bowel obstruction, bowel movement blockages, intestinal influenza, some kidney diseases. Glycogenesis is, I think, really important. Glycogenesis is happening also at night mostly, when we have created or produced lactate in the muscles, when we were working out too much, and then this lactate is converted into glycogen again to be used again by the muscles. And then it also matched to cancer predisposition. So when we say we want to use it for regeneration at night, for protein repair and all those things, then it makes sense that there is a match to these things. And when we find high readings here for night infoceutical, we should ask our clients about, we should always ask them, but it's important, about their sleep quality. Do they have REM sleep or not? Do we have too much non-native electromagnetic frequencies at night? Is there too much blue light after sunset maybe? By using flat screen TVs or computer screens, or we can use filters. We have to think about autophagy and apoptosis, which happens at night mostly. Autophagy is something where proteins in the cells are metabolized and replaced by new proteins. This is okay, but it needs a lot of energy. And when the proteins are too much destroyed, the cell would die and the whole cell would be replaced. This is also okay, but for this to do, we need stem cells. And the stem cells, they can only divide many, many times, but it's ending, and this can be seen on the telomere lengths of the chromosomes. So this is everything that you could keep in mind when you see the night infoceutical. Also think about the metabolic syndrome, which is diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure. Exhaustion, and think, of course, of anti-aging. How would we use it? Of course, the day infoceutical is best to use in the morning and during the day. We can use it separately from any other infoceutical protocol or include it. And then you should use BFA or polarity first, and then the day infoceutical, and then all the others. The night infoceutical can then be taken when it starts to get dark or before you go to bed. And it might be always 15 to 28 drops each. Both the day and night infoceuticals support our cell driver. I just gave you some summary what the cell driver is made of. We use cell driver, for example, for musculoskeletal pain, but also for cell detoxification. We could call the cell driver also electron transport chain driver, if we would like to, because we find the mitochondria, we have the oxygen, and we have the ubiquinone, the Q10 in it, and we have, at the end, we have the ATP. It's about blue light. Blue light is found in the range of 380 and 490 nanometers wavelength, and it is absorbed best around 480 nanometers by special retinal cells, which are directly connected to the SCN and produce melanopsin. And this melanopsin then starts a series of reactions which influence our sense of hunger, body temperature regulation, blood pressure regulation, heart frequency, and how we register pain. So this is very important. Blue light also directly blocks the production of melatonin. And for this, we need blue light from the sun in the morning hours from 9 to 1 o'clock maybe. And then it supports our serotonin and cortisol balance best. But we wouldn't need it, especially artificial blue light in the evening hours, because it then lowers vitamin D levels, and it also lowers the DHEA levels at night, which is always found in poor sleep. It upsets the whole metabolism and may lead to obesity. Too much blue light, especially at 4 and 40 nanometers, also reduces the DHA content in the retina. And this at the end may be a course of macular degeneration. So we should, when we see this reading, we should also think about reducing artificial lights in the evening, use screen filters, softwares that are available for our screen filter when working with LED screens in the late evening hours. And that's it for today.